Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I asked you, our viewers, to fill out a survey ranking your favorite Phil Collins albums, ranking your top three Phil Collins songs, and then picking your least favorite Phil Collins songs. Here's the results. Okay, let's do the albums first. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I posted it in our Facebook group and on Reddit, on Twitter, and it found as many people as possible. We got about 50 responses. Not bad. That's a pretty fair response. So we're going to take a look at the albums first. And what people were meant to do is we had all the studio albums, 8 of them, from Face Value to Going Back. And everyone was instructed to rank them in order from their most favorite to their least favorite. And then the software gave me a ranking based on how many albums got a first place, how many albums got second place, etc. Okay, so let's go through the albums first, then we'll do the songs, and then we'll do the least favorite songs. Okay, so ranking the albums, we have 8 albums from Face Value to Going Back, and we'll start at the bottom. Number 8 is pretty obvious. It's Going Back. Let's look at the stats here. There was one person who picked it as their favorite album. Interesting. There's 28 people who picked it as their least favorite album. So 64% of people picked it as their least favorite album. I picked it as my least favorite album. So then moving up, the next one is Testify. You're going to find that we're going in order a little bit here. So the next one is Testify. Again, only one person picked Testify as their favorite album, and 23% of people picked it as their least favorite record. But the majority of people picked it as their 7th place, second last favorite. I get it. I mean, I think that was my ranking, right? I put Testify, even though I like Testify, I put it as towards the end for me. Number 6 favorite album as voted on was Dance Into the Light. Again, one person picked it as their favorite. That's a good album to have as your favorite. I have no problems with that. 2 people picked it as their least favorite. The majority of people picked it as their 5th choice. That's interesting. So Dance Into the Light, number 6. Coming in after that is Both Sides, an album I love. Love Both Sides. There are days when I would pick Both Sides as my favorite album. Let's look at the stats for Both Sides. 3 people chose it as their favorite. I would have. Yeah, I mean, in a world without some of the other albums, I would. There are days I certainly would. The majority of people picked it as their 5th choice. That's why it's in 5th. And 4 people, 9% of people picked it as their least favorite Phil Collins album. So even behind Testify, which is surprising. Number 4, okay, this is where things we've been chronological so far. So this is where things deviate, and this is where there was some surprises. And I gotta, after I read you this list, I gotta give you the stats because it's kind of strange. But coming in at number 4, the 4th favorite Phil Collins album, as voted on by the fans, is But Seriously. That's surprising to me. But here's the thing. 25% of people picked it as their favorite. And I picked it as my favorite. It's my favorite record. 25% of people picked But Seriously as their most favorite record. And nobody picked But Seriously as their least favorite. The lowest it was ever ranked was 6th. That's really interesting. So nobody in our survey said that But Seriously was their least favorite or even their second least favorite. So that's good. I agree with that. Okay, so moving on to the 3rd spot. There's something else I want to mention about But Seriously, which I think is really interesting. Well, maybe I'll say it right now in case I forget. The same amount of people who picked But Seriously to be as their first album, their best favorite album overall, the same amount of people also picked what ended up being the number 1 slot. So that's kind of interesting, and I'll explain that in a second. Coming in number 3, big surprise here, Hello, I Must Be Going. That's a huge fan favorite, and I discovered that in when we did the song ranking list. You know, some of those songs popped up. Hello, I Must Be Going. It comes in at number 3. 18% of people picked it as their first choice. 20% of people picked it as their second choice. 25% of people picked it as their third choice. And nobody picked it as their least favorite, which is good. That makes sense. Okay, coming in at number 2 is No Jacket Required, with 23% of people picking it as their first, 30% of people picking it as their second. Nobody picking it as their least favorite, although one person said it was their second least favorite. So one person picked some of the older records to beat No Jacket Required, which is kind of interesting. And then the number 1 album as picked by the fans was Face Value. No surprise there. 25% of people picked it as their first choice. So this is what's interesting. The same amount of people, 25% of people picked But Seriously as their first choice. and the same amount of people picked Face Value as their first choice. So why is it tied? Why isn't it tied? Why is But Seriously in fourth place? Well, the reason being is that more people picked Hello, I Must Be Going as their second choice. 20% of people picked Hello, I Must Be Going as their second choice, and only 14% of people picked But Seriously as their second choice. So that's why when you combine all the scores of first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on, But Seriously actually falls into fourth, even though 25%, a quarter of the people think it's their favorite album. It's still dropped to fourth. 30% of people picked Face Value as their second choice. And the lowest it ever ranked for someone was sixth. Nobody said it was their last choice. 25% of people said it's their third favorite album. I think I put it, for me, sometimes it falls into number three. I like But Seriously, No Jacket, Face, but sometimes I like both sides more than Face. I find both sides more cohesive. Anyway, there you have it. Number one, Face Value. Number two, No Jacket Required. Number three, Hello, I Must Be Going. Number four, But Seriously. Number five, Both Sides. Number six, Dance Into the Light. Number seven, Testify. And number eight, Going Back. Essentially chronological, except for Hello, I Must Be Going and No Jacket. That's kind of surprising. Way more surprises when we look at the top 10 favorite songs as picked by the fans. Way more surprises here. One of the things that was really interesting is that basically what you were asked to do is to pick your first favorite, your number one favorite Phil Collins song, your number two favorite Phil Collins song, and then your number three favorite Phil Collins song. Depending on what ranking you gave your songs, gave them a certain amount of points. And then when we tally everyone, we're able to get a top 10. And lucky for me, we didn't have any ties in the top 10. All of them were pretty straightforward. There were a lot of surprises, although, the top few were not too surprising. What is surprising is the 11th spot, the songs that didn't make the list. There is a 5-way tie for the 11th spot. So I'll just read you those now before we do the top 10. Against All Odds, Like China, I Cannot Believe It's True, and Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, and Two Hearts. Two Hearts, Something Happened on the Way to Heaven, I Can't Believe It's True, Like China, and Against All Odds. Okay, coming in at number 10, voted by the fans' favorite Phil Collins songs. Number 10 is Sussudio. I think Sussudio is an amazing song. And if you look at all of his pop songs, the songs that are overplayed a lot, like Easy Lover, Against All Odds, Invisible Touch even, Sussudio I think is the best of all of the hits that we hear so much. And it's a track I never get tired of. I find it to be very similar to Invisible Touch, just the era and the ubiquity of it. And I love Sussudio way more than I love Invisible Touch. I think the horns are more exciting. The melody is more exciting. I'm glad to see it on the list. I had it up higher on my list. Considering, a lot of diehard fans go for deeper cuts, as we'll see on this list, it's great to have it on the list, even though it's one of his biggest songs. There are some really big songs that didn't make this list. Spoiler alert. You Can't Hurry Love, Two Hearts, as we've already seen, Odds. So I'm glad to see it make the list. And number 9 is Don't Lose My Number, same album. I was surprised by this, actually. This got a ton of votes. And I love it. I have no problems with it. I enjoy it on the record. Probably not my top 3 of the album of No Jacket Required, but there's not a bad song on No Jacket Required. So, but I was surprised that a lot of, big fans would put this in their top 10 list. I wouldn't put it in my top 10 list. There's a lot more deep cuts that I like more than this, but great song, iconic. Coming in number 8 is Find a Way to My Heart. That's my number 1 song. And a couple other people picked it as their number 1 song, which brought it up the list. So I was really happy to see it. Number 8, I think and if you look at this whole list, this, aside from Another Song, are the only kind of deep tracks on this list. If you were to show this to a passive Phil Collins fan, only this one and one other song, which we'll get to in a couple, maybe 2 other songs are deep cuts. The rest are kind of well-known hits. But very happy to see Find a Way to My Heart from But Seriously. I absolutely adore this song. I think it's fantastic. I think it's underrated. I wish it was given a bigger role in live shows throughout the years. There was kind of a more radio-friendly urban version of it that they toured a few times on Both Sides and Dance that I didn't love. I think it could have made a really good closer or penultimate track before Take Me Home, but that's just me. Number 7 is Easy Lover. This was a surprise to me. I mean, not a Phil Collins song, folks. We need to remember this. It's technically a Philip Bailey song. It's poor Philip. It's given to the other Philip. Like obviously it was a co-write, produced and sung on by Phil, but never really appeared on any of Phil's proper albums. So interesting to have it at number 7. I have no problems with this song. I don't often go for it. It actually, I've said this before, it stands out on Philip Bailey's record, Chinese Wall. I mean, that's a really, really great record. And it kind of stands out like a sore thumb a little bit. So not a bad song, just a unique tune. I think it's a really well-written song, really well-produced, a well-arranged, complicated song. So I'm happy to see it be a hit and for people to love it and put it on their list. Number 6, here's the biggest surprise. Number 6 was the biggest surprise. It got so many votes. Can you guess what it is? It's a deep cut, and it's from No Jacket Required. Can you guess? Long, Long Way to Go. I love this song. I have no problems with it. It's not in my top 10, probably not in my top 20. I think it gives some credibility, some artistic credibility to No Jacket Required. Otherwise, it would be like massive Michael Jackson style dance hit after dance hit. So this and Inside Out gives a little bit of depth to No Jacket Required. So I'm happy to see you all put Long, Long Way to Go. I think Sting's on this track, and I love hearing his voice on here. I think he played it on the Dance Into the Light tour. I know he did. And he may have played it on the But Serious tour occasionally. I'm not sure. Number 5 is I Wish It Would Rain Down. I know there's a lot of people who like it. I'm not surprised to see that right in the middle of the pack. I'm not a huge fan of it. You know that. I've said that before. But great tune. So happy to see it on the list. Number 4, so high up in the list is I Don't Care Anymore, which is really surprising. And I thought there would be kind of like a battle for, I mean, in the 11th spot, you have Like China and I Cannot Believe It's True tied. And then I was surprised, like some people, there was like one vote for Do You Know, Do You Care? So a pretty strong representation from Hello, I Must Be Going. And it turns out this is a lot of people's favorite song. And number 3 is Another Day in Paradise. A great tune. Honestly, I am surprised to see some of the more like radio-friendly songs on this list because I thought the voters would have been more deep cut fans. Some like active, diehard Phil Collins fans generally gravitate towards some more unknown tracks than the radio-friendly tunes. So I was kind of surprised to see Another Day of Paradise at number 3 and to see Easy Lover at number 7. And then number 2 is Take Me Home. I think I had this at number 2 for me too. So I'm glad you all love this song so much. I actually didn't know that fans love this song so much. I mean, it's so meaningful at concerts, but I was just kind of surprised that it made it this high on the list. So number 2. And really high too. Like, I mean, the difference between number 2 and number 3, the difference between number 3 and number 4 was a big gap. And then 2 and 3, pretty similar. And then number 1 is a massive gap. And that is In the Air Tonight. No surprise, right? And I talked about this when I did my top 10 list in another video, my personal top 10 list. I put Take Me Home 3rd and Find a Way 2nd. Even though Find a Way is my official favorite song, I believe that In the Air Tonight deserves to be number 1 on everyone's list because it's so iconic, because it rewrote, what could be a pop hit at the time. It defined his career. It was the first song stepping out from Genesis. I mean, it's just, and it's timeless. It still gets discovered today. If it were released today by another artist, it would be well respected. It wouldn't go to the top of the pop charts, but it would definitely be critically well received. So yeah, I totally think In the Air Tonight deserves to be number 1. Before we wrap up, let's look at what your top 5 least favorite Phil Collins songs are. People don't like to do this, but let's be honest. If you had to rank all the Phil Collins songs, we're basically just asking you out of the 200 songs or however many, what are the bottom 5? And what I can tell you is that there was no consensus amongst all of the voters at all. I mean, I think the biggest song, the highest song got 3 votes. And it'll surprise you. For the most part, there was no consensus here, which is good, right? Because it's basically like one man's trash is another man's treasure, as we'll see with the first track. And so some people, their least favorite song is a ballad. And then for someone else, they walk down the aisle to that song or they had their first dance to that song. So there really was no consensus, which is cool. Number 5, we'll go all the way up to number 1. Number 5 was True Colors, which is, I think that song doesn't bother me at all. It's not really Phil's song. Like True Colors was to me, it was a gamble that paid off because it was like back in the 90s when you made a greatest hits CD in order to convince people who already had all those albums and those songs to rebuy that greatest hits package, you had to put a song that they couldn't get anywhere else on there, an exclusive track. And so That's what True Colors was. Usually an artist would use like an unreleased track, or they'd write a new song hoping that it would be successful. It's kind of rare that True Colors ended up kind of becoming a hit for Phil Collins and actually earning its spot on a greatest hits package, as opposed to just being a B-side that people didn't like. It kind of ruins the greatest hits package. So anyway, but a lot of people picked it as, not a lot of people, honestly, like 2 or 3. It barely made it on the list. Number 4 is Wear My Hat. Totally agree with that. Thank you. I'm wearing my hat just for that song today. Number 3 is One More Night. Kind of surprises me. I mean, like, yeah, I don't love One More Night. I love mid-tempo ballads like Do You Remember and Every Day and Can't Turn Back the Years. But I don't like the slow ballads like Groovy Kind of Love, Separate Lives, and One More Night. So I like that in that spot. Number 2 is Groovy Kind of Love. I put that pretty high on my list. I'm surprised more people didn't pick Separate Lives. I like True Colors way better than Separate Lives. And then the number 1 song that, and it only got, by number 1, I mean, it only got 3 votes, was Sussudio. And that really surprised me, because I think it's because what I talked about before is that it is played so often and it's become so synonymous with Phil Collins. And so I can see a lot of people just not digging that track, and that's fine. That's okay. To each their own. So number 1 least favorite is Sussudio. Number 2 is Groovy Kind of Love. Number 3 is One More Night. Number 4 is Wear My Hat. And number 5 is True Colors. So there you have it. You have the top 8 records as ranked by the fans in a fan survey. The top 10 most loved Phil Collins songs. And then the top 5 least loved Phil Collins songs. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the poll. We're going to do another one of these videos for Genesis very soon, so keep a lookout for that and join in that little survey when that goes out. Please subscribe, and I want to ask you, were there any surprises? What tracks here surprised you? Were the rankings surprising in any way? I was surprised that But Seriously landed 4th. On the song list, I was surprised that stuff like Long, Long Way to Go and Don't Lose My Number made it onto the top 10, but anything that you were surprised by or anything that you were disappointed wasn't included? Thanks for watching.